are they going to professionally be able to work through issues with their customer on this? Or are they going to walk to their customer and say like, this stuff's garbage, it doesn't work, like, I don't know what's going on. It's like, that's not going to be a good situation for anybody. So
welcome to season 5 of Hired the Podcast. No, I can't believe we've been doing this long. This is longer than I anticipated doing it, but boy, the amount of great conversations I've had with people, and that's what this is. This is a show that is a conversation about the world of work and how to be the best you and help your company be the best company that it can be. And I'm excited to kick this season off with my friend Anthony Leo. Anthony's the president of IPR Robotics, company that quite literally the hands and feet of robotic systems for manufacturers. Man's got a background in electrical engineering and an MBA, and he's moved from technical roles into leadership. Today he leads a team that's launching rail systems, modular tools, and really redefining what performance and flexibility and customer value look like in an industrial context. So, Anthony, great to have you, man. Pleasure to have you. And I want to start off with a new question I'm kicking off the show with every time. Other than your current job, tell me about the best job you ever had.
yeah, that's a good question. I do probably consider this the best job I've ever had.
So I got to
however,
take that
outside
one
of
off
that-
the table. It's a cop-out.
Yeah, I had to take that off right away. But I mean, outside of that, it's being a dad. I think that's probably the best job you get is, you come home and you had some tough days, no matter what company you're at, and you got a couple kids running home or running out the door to see you, and sometimes scaring you when you're not seeing them there, getting out of your car and they're shorter, and you open the door and they're there. But yeah, to me, I think that's probably the best other job that I got.
Plus, unbeknownst to them, sometimes they are the best little consiglieres. I remember a couple months ago, had a tough situation I was dealing with, and just went for a walk with my daughter. She's 9, and the advice she gave from the place of innocence that she was coming from was really good advice, and just helped me frame the challenge in a way that I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah, a child's perspective is interesting sometimes, and it's good to remind yourself as a stressed out adult sometimes that life was simpler at one point, and sometimes it is as easy as just looking at things from a different perspective to kind of change your mind and how hard or difficult or stressful a problem is. So it's good to come home to.
No, you can't have a stressful job. I don't believe you.
No, not at all.
So you began your career with a foundation in engineering, but when we were talking before the show, you said you kind of always knew that you wanted to use that engineering piece as a stepping stone into sales and leadership. What was the impetus for you on that career journey to start in engineering, knowing that wasn't necessarily where you wanted to end?
I think it was a good foundation as far as having not necessarily a fallback, but a career path that you could be successful in. So when I was coming out of my electrical engineering degree, it was 2010. We were just going through, especially being in Detroit, the 2008 recession, and a lot of the layoffs affected our area pretty heavily. So looking at initially when I was going into college, I was planning on just doing a business degree, and kind of talking with my dad and some other people I knew. It was like, hey, if you can, you're good at math, you're good at the technical side, why don't you go after something a little bit more worth more in the job market, which at that time engineering was still pretty a good job. There are harder jobs to find, but it was a good job to have, especially in the area. So that's what kind of led me to, all right, let's do the engineering degree, find a role in companies that kind of fit my skill set as far as being a little bit more entrepreneurial minded. Throughout college and high school, I ran my own like landscaping businesses and, people ask if I could do, stain decks or strip decks and stain them, or painting a garage or something. And then the answer is always yes, even if it was the first time I did it. But it was just a way to continue to kind of do things on my own without having to go work at a restaurant or something like that, like a lot of my friends were doing. I was umpiring and stuff like that on the side, which was enjoyable. So for me, kind of coming into the job market at that point, the engineering was a good way to start. Gets me into a company that at that time I did about a year of some contract work for the Department of Defense through, at that time, the TARDEC, which I think they've changed their name since, and then General Dynamics. And then that was getting a little bit hairy with some of the contracts that were and weren't getting awarded. So that's when I ended up at a tier 1 for 4 years. And I was able to get a role that was kind of half engineering, half account management. And I found myself, after doing about 4 years of that, really enjoying more of the account management side, trying to go out and win new business. And, the high you get from taking a initial bid to completion and getting that award, and, walking in the office and knowing that you contributed heavily to the organization's growth. So that's when I kind of knew at that point, like, all right, I think I'm kind of ready for going more into the business side of things, the sales side of things, and kind of left doing the applications engineering role. And again, it was a great background to have on the sales side, because now you're taken a little bit more seriously when you go to sell something. You're not just a sales guy, you're an engineer. And that was a question I've been asked a million times on, my past sales life. Get in the room, I start talking about something, and you'd have a guy raise their hand like, "Are you an engineer?" And so, it was one of those qualifying questions. Are you just giving me a bunch of crap, or do you actually know what you're talking about? So it was I'm glad I listened to my dad and my, some people around me at that time to kind of take that path. But, it's worked out pretty well. And again, I've, the technical background, while I don't use, I'm not doing design work or something every day, but it does help me in my day-to-day understanding what customers' problems are, and developing new products with our team to solve problems and stuff like that. So that's kind of the path, I guess.
If there's a salesperson in our industry, in a technical industry right now, that didn't come up through the engineering ranks, what advice would you give them on how to develop that knowledge and understanding that could help them be able to walk the talk instead of just pretending and regurgitating what the engineers are giving them?
I think there's a level of kind of staying humble in the process. Sometimes, especially in sales, you get a little overzealous and, think I'm the best salesperson in the world. And then you come off to some customers as the used car salesman. And I think a lot of, in my experience too, so when I started doing robotic sales at the first startup I was at Rethink Robotics, I was pretty new into the automation world. I'd been in the automotive side, but I was newer in the automation. So I didn't really have the cachet or background or understanding of how things worked in the automation world, and, the different products that had to go into the level of complexity integration takes. So for me, it was actually kind of spending time with our apps engineers and kind of asking them a lot of those questions. But then going into a customer, and while I was confident in my demeanor, I would make sure I asked a lot of the questions that I knew could result in being successful or not, whether it was the pain points that they were going through, or some of the technical things. So I wasn't afraid if a customer, used an acronym, or if they described a process I wasn't familiar with. I was like, actually, I'm not as familiar with that. Would you mind explaining that to me? And I think taking that type of approach where you're trying to maintain a business front, in the sense that, like, I'm here to do a job and sell, but I'm also not the expert, sometimes takes that wall down from the person you're trying to sell to, in the sense that, like, okay, they're openly telling me they're not like the expert in all this stuff. They're gathering the information. They're a little bit more likely to give you some grace on things you might not understand up front, knowing that if you're like, I will get you that answer, within the next couple of days from my engineers, let me regroup with them. Or you gather all the information and say, you know what, I think this makes more sense for me instead of playing middleman. Let's just grab another time in the next few days to get our engineers on a call. And I think customers appreciate that. So over time, of course, you're going to know the answer to those questions. But for somebody coming into it, even if you do or do not have a technical background. I think there's just a level of take your time to learn the process, learn from other people, but go into the situations where you might be alone as an opportunity to build that rapport with somebody by being honest with them that you might not have the answer to every question, but you will absolutely do your best to go get that answer for them.
Well, it's a pattern I've noticed that so often the people that know the most say, I don't know the most as well.
Yeah, there's the phrase, right? You know what you don't know, or you should know what you don't know. And I think that's probably one of the best mindsets a salesperson could come into an opportunity as is I may know a lot about things, but I might not know everything. And again, I usually take that approach with customers to understand what they're trying to let them have the soapbox, if you will, to tell you all their things instead of trying to interrupt them. You're like, oh yeah, actually, if you did it this way, or if you looked at this, it's like, give them a chance to kind of talk through it. And you might uncover a few things that you didn't know if you were compared to if you were talking the whole time.
It's a challenge that I've seen in people, particularly in sales, when they're just starting to experience success. They have kind of a sophomore slump. Because when you just start out and you don't know crap, all you can do is ask questions. You can't even fake the answer. But then you gain a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of confidence, and then you start thinking you know everything. And customers are like, what the hell is this kid talking about?
Yeah.
And then you start to realize, oh, maybe I don't know everything. And then you kind of almost revert back to the old Columbo. I just got to ask one more question. Just one more question.
Yep.
And it could be one of the hardest things to teach.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
So you started in engineering, you made the switch to sales and business, and now you're in leadership. What was a bigger shift? What was a bigger challenge to shift from engineering to sales or business to leadership?
In some aspect, I guess I would say engineering to sales, mainly because the technical viewpoint and discussions are very different from sales-focused ones, where myself included, I would go into early conversations regurgitating every technical piece of information that I knew, because that's what I was trained and that's what excited me, but it was also something I could understand very well. And I felt that showing that I knew all these minute details would make me look better from a sales perspective, and two, it would make the company look better in the presentations. But what I learned over time is that you might actually cause yourself more problems by regurgitating technical information that they didn't want to know or ask for, because there might be other things that you now have created more stumbling blocks than the original, could you do this application question? So I think it's a mindset shift, where now you're trying to, uncover pain points and try to get them to uncover or respond and answer to the underlying question that they might not be asking. So, they might say, what's your, average wear time or lifetime on this certain product? And if your response is just, it's 6 years. We don't know if 6 years is good or bad, and trying to get back to why do you ask? Is there a situation where you've had an issue, premature wear in the past, or, something you're going to only use for a few months and throw it away? Tell me a little bit more about why you're asking that specific question. And I think that was the mindset shift, that it's harder than just responding to, an answer to a question right away. And it takes a lot more bandwidth mentally to dig and prod and spend the time doing that. But again, I think that will result in more success. The shift from sales to leadership, to me, is a little bit more natural, because again, once you kind of understand how the customers you want to, or you're trying to sell to, operate, you understand their pain points a little bit more from a higher level standpoint. Shifting to leadership's a little bit easier in the sense that now I'm trying to teach people underneath me a lot of those lessons learned that I had, which is much more natural of a process a little bit safer because you're internal versus trying to stumble externally with customers. So there's some learnings, of course, that I've gone through since taking over here, especially being over the company versus just a sales segment, of the company, the financial side, the operations side, and all that. So there's definitely learning curves, but I think part of that comes more natural just from the sales aspect. It does teach you a lot of those things, ROIs and everything in the sales process that are very similar just with running a company. So I would say from the engineering to sales is probably a little more challenging.
That curiosity state of mind, trying to understand the customer, understand their pain points versus trying to just sell your solution. Is that something that you actively search for when you're hiring someone?
Yes. Again, I think salespeople that have a general curiosity about them are going to be a little bit more moldable to maybe the process that we want to, or the approach that we want to take with our sales process. But two, I think just from a, I guess, quality control standpoint, being able to have them focus more on the pain points and those types of things is just going to have a better sales process and customer experience in general. And for me, that's kind of my quote unquote higher strategy is simply, are we easy to do business with? So that's kind of the mantra I have internally, externally, how we go to market, the sales processes that we run people through. So having somebody that's a little bit more moldable and willing to kind of have that curiosity and stuff does help with making less friction in the customer experience.
Well, that's something that it seems like you've really tried and started to focus on. You've said things like manufacturers are shifting from buying parts to buying outcomes. And if somebody on your team doesn't have that curiosity, it's almost impossible to sell somebody an outcome.
Sure.
Is that curiosity, is that something that you think you can coach and train into people, or is that something that you've either got or you don't?
I would lean more towards you have it or you don't. If I had to choose one or the other, I do think that it's harder again for people to switch that mindset. If you're used to just cut and dry answers, answer what's in front of you and not dig, I think it's a lot harder to switch to that mindset when you're stuck in that way versus having the more curiosity. You're naturally just going to ask a million questions, which is going to uncover information, even if it wasn't your goal in stating those questions. And I think that's why, again, for me, why I enjoyed the sales process is, from my youth, being in high school and being in a class there, I was always the kid that everyone was annoyed with because I would ask the questions at the end of the class and when they're trying to leave and whatever. So, but that was just kind of how my mindset's always been, I guess, is if I don't understand something or if I don't ask enough questions, I'm not going to understand it fully. And I think one of the biggest issues, especially in salespeople, is the assumption model where I got, the information I wanted, so I'll just fill in the blanks with my assumptions. And then you destroy a sales process. Either the customer, you end up trying to quote them something that they can't use because you forgot to ask them the other questions or you didn't take the time to dig through it. Or what's happened sometimes even here is, it's like, all right, did we fully, especially on a higher, like an RTU system that's much more technical, you can't really design something like that when you have moment loads to consider, or if you're doing an overhead gantry system, lot more force and weight and all that stuff that goes into it. So, if we're not asking all the right questions and we're not taking the time to uncover it, one, could we end up designing something wrong and then having to take a couple more weeks to redo the same work that we already did? Or two, did we not get far enough into the sales questions on budget, lead time needs? Like what's the issue? Is it price? Is price the only thing? Or does lead time matter? Does localization of manufacturing matter to them? Like what are the other things that they're considering in their purchasing decisions? And if we don't ask those questions, either it's going to be a race to the bottom on price and we're not providing any other value beyond that, or again, we're going to miss the mark when we go to provide them that quote and they're like, oh, actually, this doesn't meet the need. And we just spent weeks doing something that we can't even solve the problem for. So now we just kind of wasted a bunch of time and effort.
How do you hire for that? You're interviewing candidates. You only got a finite amount of time, usually a couple hours of conversations max before you make the bet with this person that this is a company you're going to be successful at. Is there anything that you do or questions you ask or ways that you dig in to uncover if somebody has that innate curiosity that you can't coach into someone?
I guess in some capacity, I almost use similar sales tactics in the interviews. I'm trying to uncover what makes them excited, what gets them up in the morning. Simple one, of course, is just what do you do outside of work? What's the things you do for fun? You learn a lot that way. And, when they go from a serious interview to all of a sudden they're smiling and talking about off-roading or something, it's, you can kind of start to see, oh yeah, I like to do off-roading and I build my own trucks and I like to pick my own, I build my own PCs and I pick out all this stuff. It's like you start to learn some of that stuff. I think it kind of helps a little bit with the curiosity of like, okay, they're a tinkerer. They work on their own cars. They do home improvement projects for fun. Oh yeah, I was working on helping flip a house with my dad. You learn different things, I think, and just kind of a general feel for somebody through natural conversation. But that's something I'm looking for in the, tell me about your job. What have you done? What are some of those, maybe on a sales process, like what type of rejections did you come up with and how were you able to sell around that? I think those are simple ones. If they're more on product side initially and they're transitioning to sales, like what types of solutions were you able to come up with to help your sales team solve or sell a product or a solution? It's not an easy thing. I definitely would say. I think it's just more of, as I hear them talk about things, I'm going to keep trying going deeper on stuff and just get a feel for, do they have that curiosity? On the flip side, if they're asking me and my team a bunch of questions through the process, I think that answers the question for me. Mm-hmm. If they're curious about what we do, how we do things, what type of benefits do you have? What type of, what's the job like on the day to day? Who do I interact with? What do I, trying to basically, what do I get out of this too? I think there is some level of curiosity that you'll learn through that process. But if I have candidates that aren't even asking me or my team any questions and I'm like, hey, you got anything for us? I'm like, no, I'm good. I think that kind of shows that's probably how they're going to end up in a sales pitch in front of a customer too, which wouldn't be good.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of the things that drives me craziest is I'm for our company, I'm one of the last steps in the interview process. And I'll talk with a candidate for 30 minutes to an hour. And at the end, I try not to dominate the conversation. I try it not to be an interview, but at the end I say, hey, you got any questions for me? And if they say something like, no, your team did a really good job of answering those questions, I'm almost immediately done. It's not a trick. It's not a game, but you've got the president of the organization sitting there and to have no questions for them about the vision and direction of the organization, regardless of who else on the team might have answered a similar question, to understand the leader that you're talking to try and understand them. If you don't have that need or that desire, I can't think of a single role where that's not a benefit to have that knowledge and to show that curiosity. Can you? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whether it's a person you're trying to sell to, a customer, or even your own manager, in the organization, showing that level of curiosity is to me a valuable trait. We had an apps engineer we brought in last year, a little bit over a year now, and just because of his natural curiosity, he had his job description, if you will, but he's carved out other things around the facility that he's been able to accomplish that bring a lot of value to our company because of his natural curiosity on wanting to learn things. So he's opened up more doors for us as an organization just by his personal natural curiosity. And again, like traits like that are, I think, just generally very desirable from, as an internal, as a leader of a company, but also just as a sales person. That natural curiosity, I think, gets people a lot further into success of their goals.
On the flip side of that, other than the lack of curiosity, are there any other major red flags you look for in candidates, or are there been some mishires that you may have had that in hindsight you can see the red flags that you might have missed?
Maybe one red flag to me in the process is the professionalism, how they interact. Like, again, you don't want some rigid person that, is a robot per se. I want to see personality. I want to see them smile and laugh and, feel like, all right, this is somebody that, you could have fun with around the office and not take life too seriously. But at the same time, when push comes to shove, like in front of a customer or internally, deadline's got to get done. They're going to get their stuff done. But I think from just a lot of the interviews I've done over the past, almost 2 years that I've been here, the ones that I'm kind of like at the end of the interview, like, nah, I think we're going to pass on this one. Sometimes comes around if they're sharing way too much information that maybe is more personal, not necessarily with them, but maybe about their customers or the organizations that they're currently working at or been a part of. Because sometimes there's a trend line of it might be the person and not just the company that had the issues. But I think some things along that, and that's not a red flag everywhere. I think, again, certain people will have very good reasons for explaining situations that might look bad on the surface or something, but it makes sense when you talk with them about it. So again, just something on a resume might not itself be a deal breaker, but I have noticed sometimes where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I have a nervous feeling that, say, for example, we have an internal issue at the company, a quality issue or something like that. Are they going to professionally be able to work through issues with their customer on this? Or are they going to walk to their customer and say, like, this stuff's garbage. It doesn't work. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's like, that's not going to be a good situation for anybody. So, not that we have those issues, but those are things I've seen at previous companies, for example, where you're going to lead customers astray potentially on something that's not even a big deal. But just by how you approach it, it might make it a bigger deal than it is. And now you have a customer who's nervous to work with you. So I think those are types of things just in the body language and the discussions that come up that sometimes are just like, all right, might not be somebody that I don't want to micromanage. I don't want to be in every single meeting. Like, that's just, there's no time for that. So you want to hire somebody that I feel, I want to hire somebody that I feel like I can just trust that when something's going wrong, they can deliver the message, they can take care of it and make things as best as possible.
What are the skills or knowledge that you think that people should be focusing on now in order to set them up for success and to be desirable and the best employees over the next couple of years?
I think number one is when somebody comes to you, especially a manager, and has you work on something, do it in the timeline that they asked for it to be done, even if it's not something that you necessarily agree with or want to do. We all have that part of our jobs on a day-to-day basis. We're like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but it's part of my job. I'm getting paid to do this. I got to do it. And I think beyond the, say, baseline of here's the requirements, here's the request, go do it. It's, again, that natural curiosity of like, well, here's what I'm supposed to do. What else could I do to improve this potentially that my manager might not be thinking of? Or, maybe there's extra details that he didn't necessarily, or she didn't ask you to do. A good example, even here, we hired a marketing person about a little over a month ago. And, it's like, hey, I want to get a couple of these new slides. I made a template. I said, here's kind of the base information if you can make it pretty, because, it's not my skill set. Find the pictures, find the whatever, add it in. And it was like, oh, by the way, I went through the whole presentation and kind of made things look a little more uniform. Like, great. I didn't even really think about that because I'm just putting fires out all day long. But yeah, there's a value add that, reading between the lines of like, oh, I own the marketing. I own the, what goes out to customers. I'm going to put my name on this, I'm going to make it look right. And I think it's the same thing with salespeople too. Nobody likes, CRM work per se. But it's a requirement, of every sales job, and going and approaching what we're doing in the CRM with, now there always can be improvements on how things are done. I don't weaponize it on my side. I've been a part of those organizations that weaponize CRM stuff. But for us, it's information flow. It's how they communicate with me. It's how we stay on top of deals. It's how I communicate with my superiors. And it's something that's important. So, if there's hey, make sure you follow up on these leads within this day, or by this day, or make sure this information is in there, do it. And I think that's probably the number one thing I would suggest for people is just, put your head down, get the work in. And then over time, just as all of us that are a little bit later in our careers now can attest to, you start to realize what's the noise and what's not the noise, what's important, what's not important. You start learning your manager on, what's the absolute, if he says this, you cannot miss or screw up on this. Or if, a certain thing you might ask for is like, all right, I know that this is kind of like a priority 3. But that's not going to be done without learning and going through and kind of putting your head down and learning. But I think that's probably the most important thing.
Put your head down and learn. Not bad. Not bad. As we finish up here, Anthony, last question. Pull out your crystal ball. What do you see for the industry over the next 3 to 5 years? Where's it going?
Man, I could do a lot of things if I knew that for 3 to 5 years. It's hard to sometimes even figure out the next 6 months. But I think in general, if we took a step back from, maybe the beginning of this year and the expectations in the robotics industry that we had, the general feeling was first half would be a little bit flat, maybe a little bit under, and then the second half would start to pick up. I think overall it stayed a little bit flat. I think the robot sales reports came out in the past couple days or something. And from what I gathered, it actually looks like there's been an uptick recently in robots sold, which is a really good sign. I think it's a little bit later than obviously we expected it to happen this year. That being said, I think that does show, at least maybe going into 26, that there should be more opportunities out there for robot cells and deployments and all the other stuff that goes around it, which of course is what we do at IPR, all the tool changers, grippers, RTUs, and everything that goes around the robot. I will say there has been a lot of, especially from the automotive side, a lot of companies that have put projects and new lines and stuff on hold. And so that has put a damper into a lot of like the integrators here, especially in Michigan and maybe Ohio, Indiana, Chicago, or Illinois in general. Some of those areas that sell into those plants. However, I do think things will start to get a little bit better. I've seen more quote opportunities in the past few months that have come through just from a volume basis than probably the previous few months. So I think there's inquiries that are coming through. Will that result in actual customers moving forward? I'm not 100% feeling on that it's going to be this mass. Maybe back in, I would say 2016 through 2018 or so, it felt like you couldn't lose a lot of the time. I haven't felt that yet. I don't think there's enough volume out there to where it's like, all right, cool. Like we're going to be selling 50% of the quotes that we put out there. But I do think, at least from what we're starting to see lately, there is some movement. So to what capacity that will be in going into 26, or how maybe the next 2 months will play out. Usually at the end of the year, obviously people are trying to spend some money. So there will be some projects I think that we'll expect to happen. But I do think going into 26, things are trending towards the right direction. It didn't dip hard, which is a good sign. Especially when you got the tariffs and some other things that to consider. Got post-election. That was another issue where people were, Oh, we got to wait until the election. All right, the election passes. Well, now we're going to wait until, the new administration takes over. All right, so that happens. Well, now we're going to wait until after the tariff situation. And it's like, there's a point where I think everyone just finally says, you know what, we could sit here and wait off of every geopolitical or hurricane or whatever else that's causing a strife, or just move on with a calculated guess or a hypothesis on what we need to do and just do it. And I feel like that's kind of where things are leading to in 26. But
yeah, the first person that says, well, we're not sure what's going to happen with the midterm election, so we're going to wait and see. Take a swift boot, man. Swift boot.
There's some planning and thought process that goes into all that stuff, of course, because it does affect, tariffs affect us, and, everything will affect everybody. However, there's a point where you can't have the analysis paralysis. You got to make a decision on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, check that box and move on. And I think that's where people are starting to get to.
I think so too. Anthony, it's been a pleasure. Who are the people that you can help the most, and what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah. So at IPR, the people that we're going to help, especially I think our skill set with custom tooling and RTUs, that's a big area for us. We do a lot in like sand casting, hot metal forged. We have special ceilings and stuff that go into those products. So that's a huge area for us. But, we'll cut RTUs exact lengths. We have a lot of inventory. So our lead times are very, very quick. We're building, designing it, assembling it here in the U.S., about an hour north of Detroit. So we have a lot of localization in what we're doing with those products. And then we have a lot of other custom systems with our cavity wax pad setting, which does hole covering automation for bodies coming out of like E-coat for the drainage holes that normally you'd have plugs in. We partner with Tessa Tape that is a tape solution instead. We have our drop on demand system that's doing coating, a lot of battery cells, battery gripper systems. So we have a lot of different solutions as well, but I think the biggest thing for us is being able to, when you look at something that's off the shelf, but you want it modified, or you need a slightly custom version of it, that's where we excel, and we're very willing to do that. And we're able to do it in a pretty, I think, quick way and efficient way. So again, our goal is to be easy to do business with, easy to work with, get you guys quotes as fast as possible, get solutions as fast as possible. So that's what we're here for, is when you kind of need that. We have standard tooling and standard grippers, tool changers, and all that too. However, when you need to go one step further and kind of modify some things, we're happy to do that. So best way to get a hold of us through our sales inbox, which is just sales@iprrobotics.com. You can enter or submit a form through our website, or we also have a chat feature on the website, which will connect you directly to one of our business development guys. So any of those ways possible, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to talk through applications.
And you're not hard to find on LinkedIn by any stretch, that's for sure.
No, I try to be as involved as possible. Sometimes it's harder. Some weeks are harder than others. But yes, feel free to shoot me a note on LinkedIn too if you can't get a hold of anybody. I'm always happy to make the connection to the team.
All right, Anthony Leo, it's been a pleasure. Thank you to Noah Cuff, as always, our producer. Season 5 of Hired the Podcast is underway. We'll talk to you all soon.